Just giving you the latest on that Israel attack on Iran. It was the largest such attack on Israel's part in history ever. Never seen anything like it.
Mick, thank you so much for being here. Israel has never conducted such a large-scale direct military attack on Iran. The IDF says it achieved its objectives.
For the Israeli Air Force to travel over 1,000 kilometers to operate with effective impunity for a few hours over Iranian airspace, to have complete air superiority and dominance over Iran, to target and take out the specific military sites they intended to, and then to return essentially unscathed is, again, unprecedented.
Now for some breaking news. Iranian state TV is now reporting several strong explosions in Iran.
There have been explosions on targets in Tehran. It comes just weeks after Iran launched a direct missile attack on Israel. This escalation comes amid growing concerns about a wider all-out war breaking in the region.
I do want to just read you here a quick update from Israeli media. Again, Jason, we're getting all of this in real time. A few pieces of military infrastructure near the Iranian capital of Tehran were targeted.
Well, that seems to be what is now underway. The Israeli Defense Forces now confirming that they are conducting precision strikes against Iran.
Now that America does obviously have the assets that you were just talking about over there, what is the level of concern at the Pentagon for the troops that went over with the THAAD defense system and the other American assets in the area?
Yeah, definitely a level of concern for the 100 service members, mostly soldiers, who are responsible for that THAAD system inside of Israel.
There are, of course, numerous military targets throughout Iran. A U.S. official I spoke to earlier this evening said if they go big, and at the time the official was not sure exactly how big this would be, it will be harder for Iran not to strike back. And that's what the U.S. is watching very carefully. The U.S. is not involved in this action in any way. But of course, if Iran strikes back, the U.S. will help defend Israel.
Now, earlier, we saw an image of a flight radar app that showed nearly all of the civilian planes over Iran and over Iraq and over Syria have cleared the airspace because they understand that this Israeli attack against Iran is ongoing, and they don't want to have commercial airliners in the skies over where Israeli jets will be flying.
This is now going to be a question of whether or not proxy groups here in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, as we heard from Courtney Kubi, in Yemen and other places throughout the Middle East, are going to now be engaged in fighting against the Israelis. That is going to determine where this war goes from here.
The coming hours or even days, Israel will have even more air defense systems in place for a possible Iranian response here.
In response to months of continuous attacks from the regime in Iran against the state of Israel, right now, the Israel Defense Forces is conducting precise strikes on military targets in Iran. The regime in Iran and its proxies in the region have been relentlessly attacking Israel since October 7th on 7 fronts, including direct attacks from Iranian soil. Like every other sovereign country in the world, the state of Israel has the right and the duty to respond. Our defensive and offensive capabilities are fully mobilized. We will do whatever necessary to defend the state of Israel and the people of Israel.
What is the difference now than in prior conflicts? Is this the worst we've seen this region, the most tense we've seen this region?
Well, when you have Israel and Iran directly involved like that and firing on one another, and there's always room for miscalculation. I mean, surely Iran knows when they launch those missiles, those ballistic missiles, that most of them would be intercepted, and they were, because Iran is very well aware of how strong the defenses are in Israel, and particularly if the U.S. helps out as well. But yes, this is an escalation that nobody wanted to see go this far. Israel is determined to make these wars end.
Iran state television reported explosions in the capital Tehran and the nearby city of Karaj. Blasts have also been reported in the Syrian capital Damascus.
Iranians are saying that their air defense systems across the country are on the highest alert, and they're saying that it's a multi-layer air defense system. So we are talking about the protection particularly being enhanced across and around these strategic facilities, the oil and gas reserves, the strategic depots that are preserved for the war times, and the nuclear facilities. So they have been protected by Russian S-300 and S-400s, then Khordad third systems, and also they are talking about the Iranian-made Bavar 373 air defense system, which are equivalent to the Russian-made S-300s. And on the top of that, Iranians are saying that several dozens and dozens of the aircrafts are now scanning the Iranian airspace, and now the Iranian army is at the highest level of the readiness.
The Israeli military is indeed confirming that they are carrying out what they describe as precise strikes on military targets inside of Iran, as we are getting these reports of explosions being heard in the Iranian capital of Tehran, and also seeing some quite dramatic images of plumes of smoke over the Iranian capital. Now, we don't know the exact nature of these targets or how many military bases the Israeli military has been striking inside of Iran tonight, but Israeli officials are taking pains to emphasize that these are only military targets, that they are not striking at any energy targets, nuclear or oil facilities, which we know had been considered by the Israeli government earlier in this process. I do expect that we will get a fuller accounting from the Israeli military of the targets that they struck and the number of aircraft potentially that appear to have been involved in this strike. What I can tell you from speaking with Israeli officials is that this decision to carry out these strikes on military targets was the process of weeks of deliberations within the Israeli security cabinet, as well as weeks of consultations between Israeli and U.S. officials. One Israeli official describing this to me tonight as a, quote, very diligent decision-making process. Another Israeli official telling me that they went after targets that, quote, posed a threat or could pose a threat to the state of Israel. Admiral Daniel Hagari, the Israeli military spokesman, in a video statement tonight saying that Israel has the right to defend itself and that it is now prepared for all offensive and defensive scenarios.
The money issue, the fact that sanctions were working in the Trump era, and the fact that the Harris-Biden administration turned a blind eye and allowed them to sell their oil on world markets, they assisted Iran in getting rich again. And now we know what they did with the money. They're supporting Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, Hamas, the Houthi rebels, and they're buying ballistic missiles that they themselves are firing into Israel. Not a good idea, in my view. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Sean, that's exactly right. October 7th of last year would never have happened if Iran hadn't have funded it, if they hadn't have provided the hardware for it, the weaponry for it. Their terrorist proxies are the ones who carried out that attack on October 7th. Their terrorist proxies are the ones who have been expanding this war against Israel. That's what it is. It's a war against Israel. We need to stand unequivocally with our ally Israel, and it's time that we quit allowing Iran to run wild all over the region. That's what Biden and Harris have done. I mean, we've got to put Iran back in its box. It is a terrorist regime. And right now, Israel is, again, it's doing the world's work here. It's doing us a huge favor. It's helping our national security. This really shows why Israel is arguably our most important ally out there. They are standing up to Iran, and they are helping to reverse what Biden and Harris have done over the last few years. It's a dangerous world. It's a dangerous region.
And, you know, for years, these two countries have been fighting through proxies. Now that they are in direct conflict, does that signify a shift?
Absolutely. Like I said earlier, that this is the first time that, Israel has conducted a military operation at this scale on Iranian soil. And so this is a first for the Iranians. Military powers that are engaged in these kind of maneuvers are gaming things out, as they're planning. So when Iran struck on October 1st in much more intense way than they did back on April 13th, they obviously had to have gamed out an Israeli response and prepared for it. But preparing for it is one thing, and then actually absorbing a real counterstrike is another. So again, we need to see when there's daylight and we have satellite imagery showing what was hit and how bad, then that will tell us what is the future direction of this direct confrontation.
Yeah, let's just remember, Sean, that we are here largely because of the deal that the Obama administration, with the full backing of Joe Biden, made years ago with Iran, where they let Iran off the leash. They sent them billions of dollars. They lifted the sanctions. They allowed Iran to start funding all of these terrorist proxies, radical Islamic terrorist proxies, all over the region and the world. And we're still living with the consequences of that. And let's not forget, Biden and Harris wanted to go back to that. They pushed to get back to that same regime where we lift all the sanctions, where we allow Iran all of this money. And what happened? October 7th happened. And now here we are. Israel is defending itself. They are pushing back on this terrorist regime in Tehran, which they have every right to do. And frankly, they're making the world safer by doing it. And Kamala Harris, she wants to know who's responsible for the destabilization of that region and for the endangerment of Israel. Take a look in the mirror, because it's their policies that have gotten us here.
And Morgan, it happened Saturday night local, but it was Friday night here. We all learned about it, which means Donald Trump heard about it as well. And at his rally in Michigan, he made these comments about Kamala Harris. Take a listen.
So Israel is attacking. We got a war going on, and she's out partying. At least we're working to make America great again. That's what we're doing. Kamala, he's the worst president in the history of our country. She's the worst vice president in the history of our country.
از 6 سالگی آرزو داشتم که اسرائیل رو نابود کنم. آره این بزرگترین آرزوی من بوده از کودکی. یعنی این همیشه بام بوده. استراتژی انقلاب اسلامی هم محو و نابودی رژیم جعلی صهیونیستی و انشالله تو این راه به شهادت برسیم.
With that, Iran has also confirmed that Brigadier General Abbas Nilforasan, Deputy Commander of the Revolutionary Guard for Operations, was killed in the Israeli airstrikes in Beirut on Friday. This comes in as a huge victory for the Israeli Defense Forces. He was killed alongside Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in an attack.
A minute of silence was observed to pay homage to Nasrallah. But as soon as it was over, vitriol ensued. Despite this anger, experts say there is little point for Iran to go into an all-out war.
There is no point because there's clearly a disproportion of force. And above all, in the event of war between Israel and Iran, the United States will be forced to re-engage.
A war the international community wishes to avoid.
I love the way you laid out
how things were under Trump with regard to this situation, and that we're basically now sitting on a tinderbox. I think it's also interesting that, as Kamala Harris in her last weeks is saying Trump is Hitler, in the last weeks I'm hearing more and more from Trump and his team, including RFK Jr., saying if you don't want World War III, you should vote for Donald Trump. And making this distinction between a party that is for war and a party that seeks peace.
Right, Rachel. Think about what Trump did for Israel. Moved the capital to Jerusalem, has been a staunch supporter of the Israeli people, has called for peace throughout the region, and put money where the mouth is with the Abraham Accords and sending the diplomats over there and bridging this centuries-old hate and building economic ties between significant Islamic countries. That was, I was part of that when I performed the duties as Undersecretary for Policy, and that was groundbreaking, and it was really promising to have this new hope building in the region, all led by President Trump and Jared Kushner and that team. It was just unbelievable progress, and it was all undone by Harris and Biden on day one when they came in, and the rather incompetent national security team that they've got in place.
Where do you see this going if Iran plans, and I'm just taking it from their foreign minister, that it is looking at some calculated response? To your point, Israel was responding to that missile attack back on October 1st. But this is what I see happening, a new pattern here, where it never ends because there's a response to the response and then a response to that response, unending.
And I think that's the whole point, right? I think if we have an election that's coming up, if it goes one way, we're going to continue to see a never-ending series of wars in the Middle East, in Europe, in Asia. That's what we've seen. It just continues to escalate and doesn't really, it never ends. Or it goes another way, and perhaps it does come to an end because we start to dry up the money that's financing these wars, and we stop to supply money into them. So, it's our strategy. We can do what we want with it. And either we're going to work to stabilize things or we're going to continue to have chaos like we do today.
But they did hit a lot of significant military targets, and Iran's downplaying what they actually did. They hit IRGC bases, they hit missile production facilities and launch facilities, and they also hit most of Iran's air and missile defense systems. So the S-400s and S-300s provided by Russia, which proved to be very ineffectual. So what this did essentially is leave Iran with very little air and missile defense. So if they retaliate to this strike, and it doesn't look like that is going to happen, but of course they make the ultimate decision, then if Israel then responds, Iran's much more vulnerable than they were before last night. So this is a big shift, and it was significant.
All right, unprecedented times.